Welcome back to The Explainer. Today we're tackling something huge. We are dismantling some of the absolute most stubborn mental health misconceptions out there. We're skipping right past the cliches to look directly under the hood at the brain's internal reality. We're going to explore what actually happens physically and chemically when the mind's incredibly complex systems just misfire. Because it's not just about feelings, right? It's about biology, it's about structure, and ultimately, it's about survival. Let's make the invisible visible. People say just think positive, but it's your brain physically struggling. I absolutely love this quote because it hits the nail on the head. It captures the exact core conflict we're exploring today. I mean, we constantly hear this well-meaning advice, telling people to simply shake off a bad mood or just calm down. But as you're going to see, that advice completely ignores the very real physiological battle happening inside. You literally cannot just think your way out of a broken chemical pathway. Okay, let's dive into this. Here is our roadmap for today. We've logically grouped 12 complex disorders into 4 major malfunctioning brain systems. 1, mood and energy hijackers. 2, broken alarm systems. 3, the illusion of control. 4, fractured realities. And then finally, number 5, empathy through understanding. Let's kick things off with section 1, mood and energy hijackers. These are the conditions that drastically alter the brain's baseline chemical energy. So there's this really stark contrast between how depression is perceived and what it actually is. It's a massive myth that it's just a bad mood you can magically shake off. The reality? Imagine waking up exhausted after 10 solid hours of sleep. Food tastes like absolutely nothing. Your brain is physically struggling to generate serotonin and dopamine, the actual chemical messengers that make pleasure and motivation possible in the first place. It feels like this heavy, constant emptiness. Getting out of bed literally feels like climbing a mountain because your brain is trying to run on a completely empty battery. Now, this chemical struggle takes a totally different form in bipolar disorder. Here, the brain chemistry doesn't just drop, it violently swings between extremes, and you cannot control it. During those manic highs, your brain is just flooded with energy. You might sleep for maybe 2 hours, buzz with a million ideas, and make really risky decisions simply because everything feels brilliant. But that mania burns way too hot. Then comes the brutal depressive crash. All that superhuman energy just drains away completely, leaving everything feeling utterly pointless. It's such an exhausting, deeply unpredictable ride. Moving right along to section 2. Broken alarm systems. This is what happens when the brain's fear and threat detection centers basically break down. Take generalized anxiety disorder, or GAD. It takes your body's normal, everyday worry and turns it into a constant, blaring alarm. Look, everyone worries about money or exams, sure, but GAD forces your brain to treat totally everyday choices, like sending a simple text message, as life-threatening emergencies. You're lying awake building these massive worst-case scenarios out of thin air. Your shoulders ache, your stomach hurts, your heart is racing. Your nervous system is just utterly exhausted because it genuinely thinks it's protecting you from a predator 24/7. And this brilliantly illustrates what happens when that alarm system goes into sudden, absolute overdrive, which is exactly what we see in panic disorder. First, the brain's fear center, the amygdala, misfires. There is no actual danger around, but it triggers a full-blown survival response. That leads to the attack itself, pounding heart, tight chest, and this genuine, overwhelming terror where you literally feel like you're dying. But here's the real trap. You develop this terrifying fear of having another attack, which ironically primes your body for even more panic. Slowly, your whole world just starts to shrink. We also really need to clear up social anxiety, because it's absolutely not just shyness or being an introvert. Shy people might feel a bit nervous, but they push through. Social anxiety is when your brain treats a simple social interaction like actual physical danger. Walking into a regular room feels like stepping under a blinding spotlight where every single person is judging you. Your heart races, you tremble, you sweat. And then afterwards, your brain applies this massive mental magnifying glass to every tiny perceived mistake. You aren't being antisocial. Your brain is just terrified of being seen. Our final broken alarm system is PTSD. Normally, after a scary event, your nervous system eventually calms down and files that memory away, right? But with PTSD, the brain gets stuck in survival mode. It's not just picturing a bad memory from the past. It involves vivid physical re-experiences. A specific smell or sudden sound can instantly drag your body physically back to the worst moment of your life. It makes your heart pound as if that danger is happening right here, right now, leaving you feeling completely broken. All right, let's jump into section 3, the illusion of control. This focuses on disorders that create a really desperate, exhausting war for behavioral and emotional regulation. Society so often views ADHD through this completely false lens of laziness or just being careless. But the biological reality is actually fascinating. ADHD is a condition where the prefrontal cortex, which is the part of your brain that controls planning and impulses, develops differently. Your brain simply doesn't produce enough dopamine to make finishing a boring task feel rewarding. And the wild part is, people with ADHD can actually hyper-focus incredibly well on things they love. But there's this painful gap between intention and action. They're trying harder than anyone realizes, but willpower alone just cannot bridge that gap when the chemical reward system isn't firing correctly. So, the crucial point here is that people casually joke all the time about being so OCD just because they like their desk neat. But real obsessive-compulsive disorder, it's mental torture. It is a brutal 4-step loop. Step 1, an intrusive, terrifying obsession invades the mind. Step 2, to try and stop that intense fear, you perform a desperate compulsion, like checking the stove 10 times. Step 3, you get maybe a few seconds of relief. But then comes step 4. The anxiety returns and it's even stronger. It's not about being tidy. It's about being a tortured prisoner to an exhausting mental loop that you simply cannot stop. Now, eating disorders like anorexia and bulimia carry a massive misconception. On the surface, it looks like it's entirely about food or calories and weight. But the core issue is far deeper. When the world feels chaotic and totally overwhelming, the brain latches onto controlling food as the one single thing it can manage. The disorder disguises itself as logic, whispering that eating is a sign of weakness. It's this desperate attempt to find control and perfectionism that ultimately, tragically, destroys the body. Emotions that others experience as waves hit you like tsunamis. Wow. This is the intense, everyday reality of borderline personality disorder. The brain here genuinely struggles to regulate feelings. Because you're lacking an emotional buffer, everyday life just turns into a constant state of emergency. A canceled plan isn't just a minor disappointment, it's a trigger for spiraling despair or even rage. It is absolutely exhausting living in constant emotional survival mode, all while everyone around you is just wondering why you can't just calm down. Let's step right into section 4, fractured realities. We're looking at 2 highly misunderstood conditions that fundamentally alter how the brain processes reality itself. So schizophrenia is an illness where neurotransmitters, like dopamine, misfire dramatically, and that causes 2 main types of symptoms. First, positive symptoms. That means things are actually added to reality, like hearing voices or experiencing false delusions, and to your brain, these perceive as 100% real. Then there are negative symptoms, meaning things are subtracted from reality. Flat emotions, a total loss of motivation, or even an inability to speak because it just takes way too much energy. Forget the violent stereotypes you see in movies. The true danger here is the absolute internal terror of not being able to trust your own mind. Our final condition today is dissociative identity disorder, or DID. Now, this is an extreme survival response to severe childhood trauma. When a child experiences abuse that is so horrific their mind just can't process it, the brain protects itself by shattering. It literally fragments into distinct identity states or alters to compartmentalize those unbearable memories that the main consciousness just can't handle. It results in a really chaotic daily life where you might lose whole chunks of time, waking up somewhere without a map and absolutely no memory of how you even got there. And finally, section 5, empathy through understanding. Let's bring all of this together. I want to leave you with a final, really provocative question to think about. If these invisible struggles are actual physical battles of the brain and absolutely not choices, how will you change the way you support the people around you? Because when we finally stop seeing these conditions as character flaws and start recognizing them for what they are, complex physiological malfunctions, radical empathy becomes the only logical response. Thank you so much for joining me for this explainer. Keep learning, keep questioning, and I'll see you next time.